Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So my last video was on a campaign here in Australia called the Red Heart Campaign, which put up the Australian Femicide map. If you want to know what that was about, check out the link below. I highly recommend you watch it, although, just a warning, it's likely to really fucking piss you off, because there's a lot of dishonest shit going on there. But the article I looked at in that video ended with this statement: men are killing men, men's rights activists, M-RAs, are lying about male violence, men are lying about statistics around male suicide, and we should all be outraged by this. Yeah, so this really pissed me off, and I was pretty determined to find out where this shit came from. Because as you can see here, there is no link, no citation, no context, which we will see is a little bit of a running theme in this video you will be watching today. And let me apologise up front for the number of times I have to point out that there is no citation backing up claims which are made. I will be doing that repeatedly, just so you know. So I actually found where these claims came from, but before I get to that, I have to give you a little bit of a background of a particular Australian politician. The reason I'm doing this is to give those of you outside of Australia the proper context of what I'll actually be going through. So 22 years ago, a fish and chip shop owner in Queensland decided she wanted to be a politician, and despite the patriarchy oppressing women and preventing them from going into politics, she managed to get herself elected. Her name was Pauline Hanson.
Before I call the Honourable Member for Oxley, I remind the House that this is the Honourable Member's first speech, and I ask the House to extend to her the usual courtesies. The question is that the words proposed to be omitted stand part of the question. I call the Honourable Member for Oxley.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Mr. Acting Speaker, in making my first speech in this place, I congratulate you on your election and wish to say how proud I am to be here as the independent member for Oxley. I come here not as a polished politician, but as a woman who has her fair share of life's knocks. My view on issues is based on common sense, and my experience as a mother of 4 children, a sole parent, and a businesswoman running a fish and chip shop, I won the seat of Oxley largely on an issue that has resulted in me being called a racist.
And her maiden speech in Parliament caused quite a bit of controversy, let's say.
Mr. Acting Speaker, immigration and multiculturalism are issues that this government is trying to address, but for far too long, ordinary Australians have been kept out of any debate by the major parties. I and most Australians want our immigration policy radically reviewed and that of multiculturalism abolished. Yeah. I believe we are in danger of being swamped by Asians. Between 1984 and 1995, 40% of all migrants into this country were of Asian origin.
Now, I come from Melbourne, and Melbourne is an extremely multicultural city. In fact, it's the most multicultural city in Australia, and for the most part, it works well. In fact, the Asians, which Pauline said were invading Australia, are very hard-working members of the Melbourne society. In fact, ironically, many fish and chip shops are now owned by Vietnamese, who are some of the nicest and hard-working people you could possibly meet. I have a great deal of respect for the Vietnamese community here in Melbourne. Now, to be fair, I'm talking from a Melbourne perspective, so I don't know what it's like in other parts of Australia, and to be perfectly honest, just because I think multiculturalism is a positive thing here in Melbourne, that doesn't mean it's not without its bad side as well. There are also negatives, and we as a society should be able to discuss them and try to come up with some solutions. But unfortunately, every time those issues are brought up, people tend to get labelled as racist bigots. And that's the unfortunate thing. Unfortunately, people tend to gravitate to one side or the other, or I should say the most vocal people tend to gravitate to one side or the other. Either they label everyone else as racist, or they are in fact racist. I personally think there's a middle ground where we can talk about these issues without being racist, while also acknowledging the positives. But anyway, I'm going slightly off topic because 22 years ago, after Pauline's maiden speech in Parliament, the media fucking exploded. They went fucking nuts. The media went just fucking crazy, and for a long time, all that was in the media was Pauline Hanson, including this legendary clip.
Are you xenophobic?
Please explain.
Xenophobia means a fear of all things foreign.
No, I don't think I am.
Now, those of you living in Australia at the time will know what I'm talking about when I say, please explain. It became a meme before there were internet memes. It was a long-running joke which everyone made fun of. And imitating Pauline and saying, please explain, was a very, very common thing at the time. Now, I believe in giving credit where credit is due, and while researching this video, I found Pauline actually has a YouTube channel which is called Please Explain. So I got to give her credit, being able to make fun of herself, although she hasn't always been that way. And I guess I can't really make this video without mentioning Pauline Pantsdown.
Ms. Hanson says she's delighted with the decision.
What the message is that freedom of speech does not extend by allowing people the right to defame others and to tell lies.
But the artist behind the song, Pauline Pantsdown, has no regrets.
My actions, my song is trivial. It was a joke.
Miss Pantsdown arrived late from Sydney, missing Miss Hanson by a matter of minutes. But she had some advice for the One Nation leader.
If people are hurt by satire, then they should get out of the political game and leave it to people who can actually justify their actions and their words and their policies.
So, in case you're wondering what that clip was about, a satirist called Simon Hunt created a character called Pauline Pantsdown, which is basically a drag queen Pauline Hanson, and he used samples of Pauline and re-edited those samples to make her say things that Pauline might not exactly agree with. I would play you a sample, but I can't actually find the video clip. Although there was a follow-up song, so maybe I'll put it at the end of the video after my end credits. But the song that was banned after the court case was called I'm a Backdoor Man. And some of the lyrics went, I'm a backdoor man, I'm homosexual, I'm very proud of it, and I'm a backdoor man for the Ku Klux Klan with very horrendous plans. I'm a very caring potato. It was a very interesting time in Australian politics, let's just put it that way. There were a lot of people who hated Pauline because of accusations of racism. Many of those accusations are well founded, by the way. I was no fan of Pauline myself. Many other people made fun of her, including many comedy skits on TV.
You also attacked Aboriginal welfare policy.
Now, when they came here 40,000 years ago, they expected to live on handouts. Now, it's all very well to sit around painting caves and growing kangaroos and getting a tan, but some of us have to work for a living.
You seem to have just attacked defenceless minority groups. Do you actually have anything positive to contribute?
Well, yes, they have a set of policies that are based on common sense.
And what are they?
First, stop all immigration. Second, stop all immigration. And third, send all the chinky chinks back to their chinky chink countries, chop chop.
And then, of course, there were her hardcore supporters who fully supported what she was saying. Very interesting times indeed. Now, long story short, because I've been going on for quite a while, and I actually want to get to the point of this video, but like I said, all this background information was kind of necessary to fill in those of you outside of Australia. But long story short, Pauline Hanson started her own political party with the two Davids, David Ettridge and David Oldfield. Now, I personally suspect that David Ettridge and David Oldfield were using Pauline for her fame or infamy to advance their own political careers. And together they founded One Nation, or also known as Pauline Hanson's One Nation. And after a while, One Nation imploded. And if I remember correctly, I think Pauline was actually kicked out of it, which was kind of ironic considering she founded the party and it was built around her. Since then, One Nation has returned, and I think Pauline is now a member of One Nation again. But in that time in between, Pauline kind of disappeared from politics for a while and was actually found guilty of election fraud, if I remember correctly. Went to jail, I think, for about 3 weeks, and then the conviction was overturned by another judge and she was let out. But we're talking about a very controversial figure here. A lot of people thought she was a joke, a lot of people hated her guts, and a lot of people thought she was the best thing ever to come into politics. I won't go as far as to say I hated her guts, but I did definitely disagree with her on many issues. I think when she says things about wanting what's best for Australia, I tend to believe that that's what she believes. It's just in many ways we disagree on what is actually best for Australia. Now, having said that, I can't say that I disagree with her on all things. In fact, there's probably very few political parties in which I can honestly say I disagree with all their policies. And when researching this video, I watched Pauline Hanson's Maiden parliamentary speech in full, and she actually said this.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I wish to comment briefly on some social and legal problems encountered by many of my constituents. Problems not restricted just to my electorate of Oxley. I refer to the social and family upheaval created by the Family Law Act and the ramifications of that Act embodied in the Child Support Scheme. The Family Law Act, which was the child of the disgraceful Senator Lionel Murphy, should be repealed. It has brought death, misery and heartache to countless thousands of Australians. Hear, hear. Children are treated like pawns in some crazy game of chess. The child support scheme has become unworkable, very unfair and one-sided. Custodial parents can often profit handsomely at the expense of a parent paying child support, and in many cases the non-custodial parent simply gives up employment to escape, in many cases, the heavy and punitive financial demands. Governments must give to all those who have hit life's hurdles the chance to rebuild and have a future.
So, after that long explanation of who Pauline Hanson was, we finally get to the point of this video, which was a post by the Red Heart campaign from September the 17th, 2016. So, in other words, almost exactly 20 years after the speech you just saw. In fact, it's 20 years and 1 week, to be exact. And the Red Heart campaign post on Facebook is called Why Hanson Must Quit. And there is most definitely some very, very interesting statements in this post. So let's get stuck into it. Pauline Hanson's maiden speech to the Australian Federal Senate contained 420 words targeted at demeaning female domestic violence victims and survivors. Okay, so they're referring to Pauline Hanson's return to the Senate in 2016. So I guess we should have a look at that. It's a 30-minute speech, but the part where she talks about family court and domestic violence is only a few minutes long. So here it is.
Family law would be the most discriminate, biased and unworkable policy in this country. I referred to it in my maiden speech 20 years ago, and still nothing has changed. If anything, it's worse. As a nation, we should hang our heads in shame when, on average, 3 men suicide a day and occasionally a woman due to family breakdowns. The whole system is unworkable and is in desperate need of change. Children are used as pawns in custody battles where women are make frivolous claims and believe they have the sole right to the children. Children have 2 parents, and until we treat mums and dads with the same courtesy and rights, we will continue to see murders due to sheer frustration, depression and mental illness caused by this unworkable scheme. Suicide is the only way out for those who feel there is no hope. After facing years of costly legal battles, their lives destroyed and the pain of missing their children is the reason many end up in a state of depression caused by the trauma and, in some cases, the blatant vindictiveness from former partners. Child support is another contentious issue and should be revised. Some parents are left caring and providing for children without any financial help from the other parent. Others refuse to work so they don't have to pay child support. The system needs to be balanced, taking in the age of the child on a sliding scale, and both parents' income should be taken into account. Non-custodial parents find it hard to restart their lives with excessive child support payments that see their former partners live a very comfortable life. Make it fair with both custody and child support, and most parents will gladly take on their responsibility. I ask all parents, is it worth the pain and anguish to deny your child the love they so deserve from both parents? They are only children for such a short time, and all children need both parents. Please put your differences aside, make your peace and come to agreements outside of law courts. The only ones to gain are the legal professions, who are rubbing their hands together watching the thousands of dollars come their way. Is it worth losing the family home? Is it worth the grief it brings not only to you but to your extended families, not to mention the children? At the end of the day, the answer is no. I speak from experience, not only as a mum myself, but as a grandmother.
Okay, so there's a lot there that I happen to agree with, but also some things which I don't agree with. For example, the 3 men commit suicide a day in Australia due to the family court. That is not backed up by any actual statistics. Now, I should clarify that statement I just made because I'm sure a lot of people are scratching their heads. Here in Australia, every single day, between 5 to 6 men commit suicide. And I have no doubt whatsoever that some of them are committing suicide due to the family court and loss of their children and the breakdown of relationships. In fact, there is a significant amount of academic literature which backs this up. The suicide rate for men skyrockets after a divorce. That's a simple fact. But the government doesn't break down the reasons why those 5 to 6 men commit suicide per day. So we don't know if it's 3 men or 2 men or 4 men or 1 man per day which is committing suicide due to the family court. Now, suicide's a very complex thing. There are lots of different reasons why men commit suicide. The family court is only one of them, and it is a fairly significant one. It is the breaking point for many men, but it's not the only factor. And Pauline, and as well as other members from One Nation, got this 3 men a day figure from an Australian fathers' rights group called the Australian Brotherhood of Fathers. Now, as I've pointed out before in previous videos, all M-RAs should also be FRAs, that is, fathers' rights advocates, but not all FRAs are M-RAs, alright? Not all fathers' rights groups are men's rights groups. They're focused on one specific right. That doesn't mean that they support us in our whole range of other issues that affect men. It's, to use an analogy that I think feminists would understand, feminism is both pro-gay rights and pro-choice when it comes to abortion. That doesn't mean, however, that every single pro-gay rights or pro-choice organisation in the world is going to believe in feminist ideology or call themselves feminists. So, although father's rights is most definitely a men's rights issue, I wouldn't call every single father's rights group a men's rights group. It's the same with intactivists. Male circumcision is most definitely a men's rights issue. That doesn't mean, though, that all intactivist groups agree with the men's rights movement on any other issue, or even call themselves M-RAs. Anyway, let's go back to the Facebook post and see what they've got to say next. Trust me, folks, it gets really fucking bad. It goes on to say, anyone who cares about the impact of gendered violence in our community easily recognises Hanson's rhetoric. Why? Because what she had to say is not new. In fact, her points of view have long been the war cry of the men's rights activists who helped fund her political campaign. No citation given. Now, I'd like to know which M-RAs are actually funding Pauline Hanson. It's definitely not me or any M-RAs I know of. There may be individuals. There may even be a father's rights group, but we don't have any evidence of that, do we? Now, I've got to give Pauline credit for talking about father's rights. It's something that a lot more politicians should be talking about. That does not mean that she's bought and paid for by the men's rights movement, though, does it? Next. These M-RAs use passive-aggressive bullying to reinforce their message of subjugation. Yes, that's right. Because when we dare say fathers are human and deserve to be part of their child's life, what we really mean is we want to enslave women, right? Once again, no citation, just a claim. It goes on to say, they hate women who are outspoken. Wow. Karen, I know you're watching this because I know you watch my videos. I hate to tell you this, but apparently we hate you because you're so outspoken. And here I thought it was the opposite. Here I thought we respected you because you were so, strong and well researched. But apparently the opposite is true. And, I guess it took a feminist to explain that to us, because apparently none of us knew it before then. Need I also mention Erin Pizzey, who opened the first domestic abuse shelters in the world for women, who is greatly loved and respected by men's rights activists. Not to mention numerous other women who are strong and outspoken and respected and loved by M-RAs. And the ironic thing is, this article is claiming that M-RAs are supporting Pauline Hanson, which is strange considering you think we hate her. It seems it's contradicted itself, and once again, need I mention, no citation. I told you you're going to get sick of me saying that, but anyway, let's continue. And they abhor women who do not conform to their idea of an ideal wife, silent, maternal, housebound, and always available for sex. Yeah, now there's no name to this piece of trash, but I have to say, the author of this is a fucking scumbag. An absolute fucking scumbag. To write this trash with absolutely no citations, absolutely no proof whatsoever of the bigoted fucking claims being made, I'm sorry, but you're a fucking scumbag. That's simple. I mean, I have no doubt this person hates Pauline Hanson for some of the racist things she said, and by no means am I defending those things. They most definitely deserve criticism. But it's incredibly hypocritical and ironic that someone would criticize her for saying such racist things, yet say such bigoted and hate-filled things towards a group of men who don't believe any of this bullshit. This is just made-up propaganda. Next. They pontificate that most victims make up claims of domestic violence and rape to punish their partners or get back at them. Yes, so it seems that the word some has now changed its definition, according to feminists, to mean most. Apparently some and most now mean exactly the same thing. Apparently they're interchangeable. Now, just let me say on that point, right? Hashtag not all feminists, only some feminists are lying pieces of shit which make up things to defame their political opponents because they don't actually have any arguments. Let me specify that. Only some. Once again, no citation. Next, the M-RAs also claim that women are to blame for high male suicide rates because these fake claims of abuse mean men don't get to see their kids, yet they are forced to pay child support. Okay, so I think this comes from the fathers' rights group claiming that 21 men a week commit suicide due to the family court. Once again, the number due to the family court is not recorded. We do know that male suicide spikes because of the family court, but we don't have a clear number of how many men die because of it. But I would argue that we do not blame women, but the family court system. And I would also point out that, yes, there are some fake allegations in the family court system towards men in an attempt to stop them getting custody or seeing kids. I hate to tell you this, but women are human, right? They do shitty things too. Women aren't saints. They aren't above fucking lying and making up things. And before I'm quote mined, no, I'm not saying only women. I'm saying women as well, which will now go through the feminist filter and be heard as only women. Anyway, let's go on because we've still got a lot of shit to shovel. Next. They also claim women are emasculating men by fighting for equality. The article is addressing M-RAs specifically, and there are no citations, once again, anywhere to show how M-RAs supposedly believe this stuff. I am just going to assume, because it says M-RAs, it is aimed at us. It is aimed at everyone who, in any way, thinks men should have any fucking rights whatsoever. So, do we believe that women are emasculating men by fighting for equality? No. Let me read between the lines and reinterpret this sentence to what we actually believe. We believe that feminists are demonizing men by claiming that feminists are fighting for equality when in fact they're not. I think that's a much more accurate way of writing that sentence. Next. For example, breaking through the glass ceiling. Well, Pauline Hanson didn't have any problems doing that, did she? I mean, she was working in a fish and chip shop and she managed to be elected to the Senate twice. For some reason, that glass ceiling doesn't seem to be holding her back. Next. Taking on power roles and pushing for equal pay. Yeah, equal pay, which women have had in this country for fucking decades. Now, women do not earn equal money because they typically work less hours or different jobs. Now, the equal pay argument here is quite important for the next point that the author makes. So let's go on to that. These men also use fake or discredited statistics to prove that most men are victims of extreme female violence. Okay, need I point out the irony of saying that we use fake or discredited statistics right after using the equal pay argument? The irony is going off the fucking scale here, isn't it? But once again, we have the word most instead of the word some. We do believe that some men are victims of female violence. That is a fucking fact. I don't know anyone who believes that Most men are victims of extreme female violence. That seems like a little bit of an exaggeration, don't you think? But yeah, once again, the word some has been morphed into the word most. Apparently, they mean exactly the same thing from now on. Once again, not all feminists, just some feminists are lying cunts, right? Next. Pauline Hanson is a puppet of the men's rights movement. Not only is this a joke, it's also extremely misogynistic, because they're basically saying the only reason she has gained any success is because of the men somehow pushing her to success. We're her evil puppet masters pulling her strings.
I don't like a puppet without strings. There's a muppet in the wings and it's saying racist things. I won't cop that. No way.
Now, you've probably picked up a tone from me throughout this video that maybe I'm not Pauline's biggest fan, but I do give credit where credit is due, and yeah, she did manage to get elected to Parliament twice. That's to be respected. She was also a single mum who ran a small business by herself. I don't agree with much of her politics, but I gotta respect her ability to fucking get shit done. But it's ironic that all the arguments they make towards Pauline Hanson, they would never justify being made towards a female politician on the left. It's a very interesting set of double standards. It's only if the female is on their side that she's somehow protected, and any kind of criticism is, a death or rape threat or some bullshit like that. I think that's the rules. I think that's how it works. Anyway, next. She is the perfect pin-up for them. She takes everything they say as gospel. She doesn't bother researching or verifying the information they feed her. Yes, once again, let me point out, not a single citation in this whole post, despite the outrageous fucking claims it's making. So, yeah, you don't really get to criticise others for not bothering to research or verify information when you just make a whole post full of unfounded claims, bigoted unfounded claims, with not a single fucking citation to back it up. Next. This is why she is so dangerous. Her unverified, regurgitated rhetoric hits home for a minority of disenfranchised Australians. Well, that's strange. I thought intersectionality was all about looking out for disenfranchised minorities. So shouldn't intersectionality be looking out for these particular men? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Disenfranchised minorities doesn't include males who are disenfranchised minorities, does it? Hashtag feminism is equality. Next. And a lot of those supporters, the people who voted for her, are violent, angry men. Now, how exactly do you know that a lot of the supporters who voted for her are violent, angry men? How do you know they're violent? How do you know they're angry? How do you know they're men? How do you know who voted for her? I would love some explanation as to how you know that her voters are violent and angry and men, especially considering many of the positive comments towards Pauline in the comment section of this post are left by females. But what the poster is actually saying here is that anyone who supports fathers' rights is a violent, angry man. Because that would be the only reason for a man to want custody of his kids, to get revenge on the mother. And if you think I'm being harsh, that's an argument which is commonly made by this type of feminist. Fathers only go for custody to get revenge on the mother. Because, it couldn't be that a father wants to be part of his child's life. That would require admitting that men are actually fucking human, wouldn't it? Next. By standing up in Parliament and rehashing the poison spread by the M-RAs. She simply gives credence to any man who feels he is justified in beating his female partner into submission. Are you fucking joking? What a fucking scumbag. What an absolute fucking scumbag. To suggest that maybe fathers should be part of their child's life is somehow justifying men beating their female partners into submission. Now, someone might point out that maybe the author of this piece of bullshit is talking about Pauline suggesting that women make false allegations in court to get custody of their kids. And you know what? Some women do that. Once again, some women. Not most, not all, some. And you know what? Some fathers lie in court too. But of course, the author of this isn't willing to accept that because only men do bad things, right? And only women are victims. That's the rules we're playing by here. Next. In saying men are driven to murder because they are frustrated, she simply washes the blood off the killer's hands and places all responsibility for the victim's death on the victim. Okay, some men. Once again, you seem to have a problem with the word some. There are some men who, yes, they break and end up murdering their kids and their partners. Not all men, not most fathers, not all fathers. Some men. They are an extreme minority. In fact, when a man breaks because of the family court system or a family breakup, he is vastly more likely to kill himself than to kill his ex-partner or kids. But sometimes that does happen. Sometimes he does kill his ex-partner and his kids, and quite often then kills himself. And you know what? Some mothers do that too. Note the word some. Not all, not most, but some. So, maybe we should be able to discuss that without reacting like lunatics. Maybe we should be able to talk about how some people, be they mothers or fathers, end up breaking and killing their kids. Often this is combined with mental illness and depression, maybe drug or alcohol abuse. All these things are things we should be able to fucking discuss like adults. But apparently we can't. Apparently trying to discuss this is just victim blaming. Next. And that's not acceptable in a country where women are more likely to be killed by their male intimate partner than by any other means. I'm going to repeat that last bit because it's rather important. Women are more likely to be killed by their male intimate partner than by any other means. Well, that is a very, very interesting statement, especially from someone who claims that, we use fake and discredited statistics. Once again, you'll note that there is no citation to back this up. So let's do the hard work for this particular author, considering they're too lazy to actually do it themselves. And let's find out if the biggest killer of women in Australia is actually domestic violence. Now, that is a very, very interesting claim, isn't it? So let's talk about something which gets a lot of publicity in Australia, and that is the road toll. So let's have a look at some years for the road toll in Australia. The total for 2013 was 334 females dead. 2014 was 331. 2015 339. 2016 337. So let's round it up and say around 330 women every single year die on the roads, right? So that's pedestrians, passengers, drivers, etc., etc. So that would mean that there must be over 330 women being killed by domestic violence each and every year in Australia. Wow, that seems pretty high. Let's have a look at another major cause for women dying. The suicide rate for females in 2016 there were 715 females who killed themselves. Now, that's a rather small number compared to the number of males, which is 2,151, but we're talking about the leading cause of female deaths here. So 715 females took their life in 2016. So I would assume the number of women who are killed by a male domestic partner must be far higher than that, because, you know, it is the leading killer of women apparently in Australia. So let's cut to the chase and let's go to the top 5 killers of women in Australia. And look, obviously the top one must be domestic abuse, because this post by the Red Heart campaign wouldn't be lying to us. So it must be, the number one must be domestic abuse. So let's have a look at number 5. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And that kills 3,309 women each and every year. Well, technically these figures are from 2016, but roughly that number each year. So number 4 is lung cancer at 3,387. So it must be more women being killed by their partners than that each and every year. Number 3 is cerebrovascular disease. 6,212 in 2016. Now, I'm going to skip to the number 1 spot because the figure is slightly skewed because there's more males dying. So the number 1 spot is actually the second biggest killer for women, and that's heart disease with 8,207. So that leaves the number 2 spot for men, which is the number 1 spot for women, with 8,447. So that must be domestic violence, right? There must be 8,447 women killed in 2016 because we were clearly told by the Red Heart campaign that women are more likely to be killed by their male intimate partner than by any other means. Oh, look at that. The biggest killer of women in Australia is actually dementia and Alzheimer's. That doesn't make sense. I thought it was domestic violence. But it seems women are dying of a disease that affects people who are elderly. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, all right, let's find out what the domestic abuse deaths were in 2016, because it has to be more than 8,447, right? So the Australian government stats for family and domestic violence from 2016 says that 177 people were killed. Now, 53% of them were female homicide victims. So 53% of 177 is 94 female victims. But that doesn't mean that all those female victims were killed by male partners. I do, however, have an article here from the end of 2016 from the Sydney Morning Herald that puts the number of dead women for 2016 killed by male partners at 71. This is a bit strange. This is very, very strange. Because last time I checked, 71 wasn't more than 8,447. It's weird. Maybe they mean 71,000. That must be it. Now, obviously, the biggest killer of women in Australia is not male intimate partners. Clearly, that is a nonsense statement. And clearly, the writer of this poorly researched, poorly written piece of excrement actually means women are more likely to be murdered by their intimate partner than by any other person. But that is not what the author wrote. Now, I could be very generous, I could steel man them, which is what I would normally do, but I'm not going to in this particular case for a number of reasons. First of all, the fact that the author has said on more than one occasion that we present fake and discredited information while presenting this poorly written piece of shit with absolutely no citations and misleading information. Secondly, a lot of people will read this and take it at its word and assume when the author says killed that the author actually means killed and not murdered. And this is a major problem I have with many feminists. They tend to repeat things, and these things tend to be distorted or tend to grow in the telling, of course not backed up by citations or evidence, and it seems the more often these things are repeated, the more often they become distorted. I remember a number of years ago doing a video on a person from Tumblr who had collected a whole bunch of rape statistics and just put them together in such a way that if you did the math, it worked out that she was claiming that 200% of women have actually been raped in their lifetime. Now, clearly she didn't understand the stats. She put them together in such a way that misrepresented them. Not that they were all accurate to begin with, but the end result was a misrepresentation of reality. And that's exactly what we've got here. If you're going to criticize others for not being accurate, then you really should take the time to make sure that you're accurate. But the other reason why I'm not going to be charitable, and I'm going to address this as it is written, as opposed to what she probably meant, is because I want to make another point as well, and that is, as we just saw by the stats I presented, women are roughly 10 times more likely to kill themselves by suicide than to be killed by an intimate male partner. Now, this is a very interesting point because it's something I rarely, if ever, hear feminists talk about. In fact, the only time they seem to bring up female suicide is when M-RAs are talking about male suicide, and we're told that women attempt it more. That seems to be the only time they're ever interested in female victims. Actually, to correct myself there, they're not actually interested in female victims of suicide when they bring up that statistic. They're actually interested in those who have attempted and failed because they think it's a larger number than men who have actually succeeded. So if the number of females committing suicide is 10 times greater than those who are actually being killed by male partners, why aren't they talking about it? Why are they so silent about it? Why the focus on domestic violence? Now, personally, I think you can talk about both. I do all the time. When I talk about men's issues, I talk about male victims of domestic abuse, and I also talk about male suicide. I don't exclude one because one is a bigger killer of men than the other. They're both relevant issues. But we're constantly told by feminists that we can only focus on the most important issues, the main issues, the issues that kill the most people. And that's because that's why we need to focus on female victims of domestic abuse and not male victims, right? Because more females die, therefore it's the bigger issue. Yeah, okay, why aren't you focusing on female suicide then, considering 10 times more women die? The answer is very simple, because more men die from suicide, because it's a bigger issue for men. And also because they can't demonize men by talking about female victims of suicide, can they? But because more women die from domestic abuse than men do, they can spin that as a female issue. And because men typically are the ones killing those women, they can also demonize men at the same time. It ticks all the feminist boxes. So we can come to the conclusion that feminists aren't really interested in saving women's lives, or they're not really interested in helping female victims. They're just interested in spinning a narrative where women are victims and men are perpetrators. Otherwise, why not talk about females who kill themselves? Now, I'm sure if any feminists are watching this, they'll be thinking, or possibly typing away in the comment section, that maybe some of those women who have committed suicide are actually committing suicide because of men. Possibly they're committing suicide because they're in a domestic abuse situation which they can't get out of. And, you know what? That is a fair point. I suspect that there are some women, note the word some, not most, not all, but some, who do commit suicide because they're pushed to it by an abusive male partner, which is also an argument we can use for male victims of suicide, especially considering men in domestic abuse situations have next to no resources. In fact, pets have more resources here in Australia than male victims of domestic abuse. So we're actually almost finished this Facebook post by the Red Heart campaign, so let's get through the last little bit. It goes on to say, 44 women have died at the hands of men in Australia this year. Okay, so we can speculate that probably around that same time there were 440 women who had committed suicide, and strangely feminism is completely silent about them for some reason. Yeah, apparently female death only matters if a man is killing that woman. Next. With such an appalling gendered violence death toll, hold on. As I've just pointed out, women commit suicide 10 times more often than being killed by their intimate partners, so I'm not exactly sure how that's a gendered death toll, especially considering men are more likely to kill other men or themselves than they are to kill women. Now that's a very, very interesting point. Men are more likely to kill other men, men are more likely to kill themselves, and women are more likely to kill themselves than men are to kill women. So out of those 4 options, men killing women is the smallest one. The only one smaller than that would be women killing women, I assume. So I'm not exactly sure how it's gendered violence against women. But anyway, let's continue. No politician, no public figure, no one with an ounce of power has the right to legitimise and condone brutality against women. Well, I don't believe anyone is doing that. In fact, politicians seem to be bending over backwards to do the exact opposite. And surely they should be saying violence against anyone, including children. But no, apparently only violence against women counts. That's the rules, folks. Next. Pauline Hanson needs to step down from the Australian Senate before another angry, brutal, disenfranchised man murders his female partner because he is frustrated. Now, it is true that Pauline used the word frustrated in her speech, and it is not the perfect word, right? Someone gets frustrated if they're forced to wait in a line too long, or if they're stuck in traffic, and being frustrated is not an excuse to kill someone. So frustrated is a very unfortunate word. It's not the appropriate word. However, that's not exactly what Pauline said, is it? Maybe we should go back and have a look at a small clip and see exactly what Pauline did say.
Children have 2 parents, and until we treat mums and dads with the same courtesy and rights, we will continue to see murders due to sheer frustration, depression and mental illness caused by this unworkable scheme.
So what Pauline actually said was sheer frustration, depression and mental illness. Now, that is very, very different than just saying frustration. Like I said, you get frustrated waiting in a line or stuck in traffic, right? That's no excuse to kill someone. But sheer frustration, depression and mental illness, that's a totally different thing. Surprise, surprise, the writer of this article left out the word sheer, left out the word depression, and of course left out mental illness. In fact, none of these things are mentioned anywhere in this post, yet the frustration part is mentioned twice. It's almost like they're trying to create a straw man and downplay what Pauline actually said. Now, just in case the author of this piece of shit ever happens to watch this video, which I seriously doubt they would, but just in case they do, the word sheer means nothing other than unmitigated. used for emphasis, right? So sheer frustration would mean that someone is at the end of their rope. And considering the number of men who commit suicide out of sheer frustration at the end of their rope is an appropriate metaphor. We are talking about men who have been ground down by a system. They've spent tens of thousands of dollars and been through the court system and lied about and abused. They're essentially victims, and many of them end up killing themselves, and a very, very small percentage of them kill their ex-wife or their ex-wife and kids, and usually themselves along with them. Once again, this is a conversation we should be able to have reasonably. We should be able to talk about these men and why they feel they're put in that position, and we should be trying to come up with solutions, instead of using it to demonize all men and those who want to deal with these issues and find solutions. Now, I don't like playing the more people die by this, therefore it's a bigger issue game, but considering that's the door that's been opened by this Facebook post, there are about 30 times more men who kill themselves every year than women who are killed by their male partners. That is going by 2016 statistics, which I think would be fairly representative of most years. 30 times. So, look, I don't believe that half of those men have killed themselves due to the family court or family breakdowns. But if only one out of every 30 kills himself because of the family court, or the family court plays a part in him killing himself, then that is an equivalent number of men to the number of women killed by men in domestic abuse every year. 1 in 30 men who commit suicide in some way have been pushed to it by the family court or family breakup. Personally, I think that's an underestimation. So, yeah, if we're going to talk about the women who were murdered by their male partners, and for the record, that is a conversation we should be having. We should be having it reasonably, though, not like the one we are actually having. But if we are going to talk about that, then, yeah, there is also a place to talk about the men who are pushed to killing themselves by the family court and family breakups. I don't see why that should be such a controversial thing. Unless, of course, you're a feminist ideologue and you don't see male life as being as worthy as female life. Now, anyone who's watched a lot of my videos know that I'm a centrist, and to be perfectly blunt, I find Pauline Hanson and One Nation to be far, far too right-wing for my liking. And I have to say the same thing about Cheryl Lee Moody and the Red Heart campaign. They are far, far to the left for my liking. But if I were to put on my M-RA hat for a minute, then I have to say, as a men's rights activist, Pauline Hanson is making a lot more sense. At least she's talking about these issues, although it may not be 100% accurate, and I think there's some room for improvement. At least these issues are being brought up.
Me now, it means that I don't like it. When you turn my voice about, I don't like it. When you vote One Nation out, my language has been murdered. My language has been murdered. My shopping trolley murdered. My groceries just gone. I don't like it. When you turn my voice about, I don't like it. When you vote One Nation out, my language has been murdered. My language has been murdered. My shopping trolley murdered. My groceries just gone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 racist, rubbish, racist, hate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 racist, rubbish, racist, feel the heat. I don't like it when railway lines are white. I don't like it when day becomes night. My language has been murdered. My language has been murdered. My shopping trolley murdered. My groceries just gone. I don't like it. No, I don't. Never did. I don't like it. I don't like anything. I don't like it. No, I don't. Nowhere near. I don't like it. I don't like anything. explain? Why can't my blood be coloured white? I should talk to some medical doctors. Coloured blood is just not right. I don't like anything. I can't do anything about it. But I like dancing. I like the disco, because I left my heart in San Francisco. Yeah, feel the heat on the street, dance to the beat, out of your feet. Feel the heat on the street, dance to the beat, out of your feet. Get down, down, down. I don't like anything except I like Neil Diamond. Yeah, disco, dance, disco nation, not a chance. Disco, dance, out of my tree, out of my branch. I don't like it. No, I don't. Never did. I don't like it. I don't like anything. I don't like it. No, I don't. I don't care. I don't like it. I don't like anything. I don't like a puppet without strings. There's a muppet in the wings, and it's saying racist things. I won't cop that. No way. I don't like anything. Video killed the racist star powered. Wondered what you are. But here's on the scrap heap too. Bit of a downer. I don't like anything. I can't do anything about it. But I like dancing. I like the disco, because I left my heart in San Francisco. Yeah, feel the heat on the street, dance to the beat, out of your feet. Feel the heat on the street, dance to the beat, out of your feet. I don't like it. No, I don't. Never did. I don't like it. I don't like anything. I don't like it. No, I don't. I don't care. I don't like it. I don't like anything. No, the whole thing is wrong, and it stinks, and I don't like it.